Hello and welcome to the big picture. India has seen census being undertaken every 10 years without fail for several decades. The figures and data which emerges from which is a gold mine which has myriad users. However, one data which always almost results in a controversy is the religious census. Though the main census figures for 2011 was available over 2 years back, the government has not released the religious census figures even today. However, the figures have leaked out and has already resulted in a controversy. The Hindu population percentage, according to it, has reduced and Muslim population percentage has gone up. In an atmosphere prevailing in the country where religious conversions has been a major controversy, these figures only add fuel to the fire in the hands of vested interests. Why are the governments hesitant to release these figures and how does one interpret these figures? We will look at this today with Wajahat Habibullah, former Chairman National Commission for Minorities, Professor Rakesh Sinha, Director, India Policy Foundation, and on the phone line from Trivandrum is former Census Commissioner and former Chief Secretary of Kerala, Dr. M. Vijayanunni. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Unni, I would like to come to you first. You know, why is it that when the figures are available with the Census, Commission of India, why and how is it that these kind of figures are always withheld? Who takes this decision, and doesn't the Census Commissioner have the powers to release all these figures as soon as they have it?
Obviously, some of the sensitive data are referred to the government in power at the time, so that it doesn't catch the government and others by surprise, and everybody is sufficiently attuned to what the results are going to be. Of course, no government has the powers to withhold data forever,
right.
Nor has any government any powers to tamper with any of the data, because census, as you know, is a sacrosanct set of figures,
right.
And its credibility is wholly dependent upon its total honesty,
right,
and integrity of the figures.
Absolutely.
But the governments in power of the day sometimes have their own political considerations, as has happened very often in the case of say subjects like religion and language.
Right.
And therefore, the governments usually interfere to the extent of delaying it or holding it up, etc., which is what seems to have happened this time also. But then this cannot be held up forever. It
exactly.
has to come out. And
no, it cannot be held up. As you rightly pointed out, it cannot be held up forever. One second thing is that you cannot change or tamper with the figures which are already there.
Right.
So in that case, is this the first time that this kind of, especially the religious data, has been delayed so long, or has it happened in the past also?
I think it is doubtful whether the religion figures in particular have been held up by any previous government. They have all come out in time. Of course, it may have taken some time for the organization to total up the figures and come to the last final figure. But governments in power, governments of the day, have not usually interfered in this thing, and it seems to be probably a rare instance of the elections coming up and the government of the day deciding that it should not be released at that time.
Okay, that's interesting. Please stay on, Dr. Unni. I'll come back to you. Dr. Habibullah, how do you look at this? Why do you think government... See, Dr. Unni, who has been a former Census Commissioner who watches all these things very carefully, says that this may be one of those rare occasions where, this happened. Because we are told that these figures were available a year back. If not more, at least a year back. Then you think that was the right thing for the previous government to have done it, and now for this government to also have delayed it so further?
Well, the figures were known for, I believe, from even more than a year back. When the census was actually completed shortly thereafter, they were known. I really don't know the reasons why they were not disclosed. When you're collecting these figures, I suppose that it is the right of the citizens of India to know what those figures are. It is also the duty of the Census Commission to release the figures. The question is a wider one. Why do you need to have a religious census at all?
That is, you're posing a fundamental...
I think that is really the question, because the religion that an individual follows in our country is no business of government. That is my personal action, and I would go further than that. Traditionally, the population has not been historically segmented on the basis of religion. There have been areas where there have been a considerable merger.
Right.
You know, you could not really tell the religion of a person from the particular practices that he may have, because they are practices that came from both what is regarded as the Hindu faith and the Muslim faith, and even among the Christians. For example, the caste structure.
Exactly.
Now, Lakshadweep is a completely Muslim territory, but it has a very rigid, it had till recently a very rigid caste structure. So what do you classify those people as? So this classification really started taking place after the War of Independence in 1857, when it appeared to the British that it was necessary to start dividing the population along certain grounds. And that is the result, and I think they're learning from that. We should now give up this idea of taking, you may need religious numbers of particular communities for a particular purpose. In that case, you count them and do your research on that. I believe that it is not necessary for the census to actually record that.
Very interesting. Rakesh, Sinha, would you agree with that?
No,
How do you look at this?
I think the religious data, anybody with a blinkered vision can say that we don't need religious data.
You don't need.
We need religious data.
Okay.
Only the blinkered vision, people with the blinkered vision.
Okay.
Just see, India is the land of multi-religious country.
Right.
When we are implementing policy on the basis of certain religious backwardness, just I am giving two examples. In 1871,
Religious backwardness?
just I am telling you, in 1871, British government formed a single member committee under W. Hunter. That was a Hunter committee. That was used that Muslims are backward in Bengal. In 2005, so in 2007, this Suchar committee report came with the Muslim backwardness and it was exclusively for the Muslim backwardness. The question is here that if you don't have religious data, you cannot have, because data is not a dry data. It has social, economic and cultural significance.
Absolutely.
And for that significance, I say, suppose there is a lopsided development or lopsided economic development in any community, some communities backward, some communities forward, then you have to examine, you have to diagnose. I am just giving one example of the 2001 census. Between 1961 to 2001 census, it is not the population growth of different communities. For example, in Delhi, the Muslim population growth is 987%. While the general population growth is 421%. In Orissa, general population grew to 109% and Muslim population 253%. In West Bengal, 129% and Muslim population 189%.
Okay.
In just one more state, Haryana, general population 178% and Muslim population 321%.
Right.
It is not the question of which community is growing more faster and which community is growing not faster. It is a question of why such trend is there. So it is a kind of sociological examining the community,
Okay.
community-based.
Sociological examining, you say. Professor Jodhka, as a sociologist, you heard what Mr. Habibullah said. How do you look at this?
Well, India is a democratic society and it is also a developmental state. So we need data. We need data on all kinds of variables. Unfortunately, we continue to collect our data around categories which were invented by the colonial rulers. We don't have the kind of religious classification on ground which we get in the census. Religion is very important for
kind
us.
of distinction which is being made in the census, you said doesn't appear on the ground.
It doesn't exist on the ground. You have diversities of faith systems. There is nothing called one Muslim identity in India. There are at least 25 different kinds of Muslim communities in India, and we need to have specific data for each community,
And
or even if there are 50.
And these census figures don't give us any idea
They
of that.
do, but they also in the process end up simplifying things. Same is the case with Hinduism. What we now classify as Hinduism on ground has multiple faith systems. Even Hindus themselves will say we are Vaishnavites, we are Shivites, and then there are obviously Dalit populations, and so we need data. It's not like we don't need data, but we need to invent new categories which, as is being rightly pointed out, are developmental in nature, which help us enhance and institutionalize citizenship kind of status. So backwardness is associated with some kind of community backgrounds in India, and that's not something we can run away from. It's not an individual variable, it's community variable. if we have certain kind of Muslim communities in Bihar.
When you're talking of community variable, you're talking about it as a sociologist with empirical data about that.
Precisely, we need that kind of empirical data that micro level studies cannot conduct. So we do need census. For example, even if we have to talk about Muslim communities, the varieties of Muslim communities with varieties of features, social background, developmental process, their own kind of faith systems, their cultural identity, they vary significantly, radically. I mean, Kashmiri Muslim is very different from a Malayali Muslim. Within Kerala also you'll find 3 or 4 different kinds of Muslim communities which are more different from each other than they would be different from the neighboring Hindus or Christians. So I think these are things that we need to disaggregate these communities at the regional level. I think we need to take this data from the central list to the state list. Even when we collect data on religion, the number of responses that you have is large, right? So Bohras will not report themselves as Muslims, they will report themselves as Bohras. Within Sikhism, people would report themselves as Ravidasis and Ramdasis. So these are kind of subcategories, and those need to be classified.
And there is no scope for these kind of variables to be present in the census.
It can be done. It is already there.
The way present census
present structure doesn't have that. That's why it becomes available to kind of communal interpretation. When you begin to look at the growth rates and then you start comparing them, that unnecessarily creates suspicion. Actually, that also is a good indicator of backwardness. If certain communities are growing faster, that only shows that their level of development is very low. So at the macro level, we do need to think about it, but it should always be in the language of development. The moment you take it in language of religious competitiveness, that creates problems.
Would you like to, I want to go to
I think that this is a very simplistic interpretation of that it is a communal interpretation. I am just giving one example. Parsis are only 69,000 in this country. Why their population is decreasing? It is not a question of communal interpretation. Secondly, we have the National Health Survey reports. We have 4 reports available with there. In that report, we just examine that which community is using contraceptive, which community is not using. It is not, someone is free to make a communal interpretation, but the collective wisdom of the nation.
Intra-community, there are significant variations.
Inter-community also there are variations. If you are examining that some community is more conservative and they are not with the population policy of the country, that is not a communal interpretation. If it is a communal interpretation, then let it be there. But
don't club them together as one community.
Urban middle class very similar to let me get Mr. Dr. Vijayanunni on this. Dr. Unni, I mean, very interesting points have been raised here. How do you look at it? You have had the experience of conducting census in this country. Do you agree with Dr. Jodhka that we need to have a more disaggregated way of looking at things, and he's even suggesting that it should become a state subject, not a central subject?
Yeah, I will answer that. Actually, let us start from the beginning.
Right.
Now, whether there is a need for enumerating people on the basis of religion at all, that is the first question raised.
Absolutely.
Actually, you see, the Constitution of India recognizes minorities. It asks for special steps to see that minorities are not left behind and that they come up with the majority. That is the basic principle. Now, how do you find out who is a minority and how many people are there in each minority community? The basic classification is a religion, because religious minority is one of the most important and the most. Actually, Mr. Habibullah would not have been chairman of the Minorities Commission if these minorities had not been enumerated and the commission had not been formed for the minorities alone. So first thing is there is no question of religion being irrelevant or unnecessary. The classification. It has been there right from the beginning of census 150 years ago.
No, but sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, but do you agree with Mr. Habibullah as far as he says that this whole system of taking census was evolved by the British and with a particular motive behind it?
Absolutely not. It is actually the British used to take the census on the basis of castes and communities also. That answers the other point which the other gentleman raised.
Right.
That is, disaggregated data are required for the purpose of various development schemes and to assess the comparative development of various castes and communities.
Right.
And therefore, it is not only religion-based figures that are required, but you also should have a caste-based disaggregation. And of course, the census being the most dependable source of data collection, this cannot be left to the states. Actually, caste data collection has been given to the states on a sort of experimental measure time and again, but each attempt has failed miserably, and therefore it is only the national census which can collect at least reliable data for the entire society of India based on socio-economic and other considerations, and these alone will provide the required foundation in infrastructure as far as data are concerned for evolving specific region-specific and community-specific development programs. And therefore, and you take for example the United States. President Obama may come and say that religious strife should not hold back India, or only religious unity will see India progress in the right direction. But you see, what about the United States itself? They have the classification based on race, which is as contentious as religion in many other countries.
Okay.
And they have never stopped, or they have never balked from collecting data for race, because everybody recognizes that in census, collecting the various socio-economic, educational and other characteristics of different communities, that is races as far as the United States is concerned.
Okay,
It's absolutely
Dr. Unni, one more question to you. Do you think that the present methods of collecting data, census data, is fine? Do you think that or do you think that there are certain changes needed, as Dr. Jodhka was pointing out, that certain data which needs to be available? So can there be some kind of a change in the methodology of collecting the data?
Yeah, precisely. That is the point. Actually, you see, that is why we had all asked for the reintroduction of caste in the 2000. Ever since 1991, we have been asking for it. It was there till 1931.
Right.
And in 1941, because of the Second World War economy measures, it was given up. And then from 1951 onwards, the independent Indian governments have also stopped short of collecting caste-wise data. But then that is a glaring lacuna in the database of India society. And that's why time and again the governments of India and the states are now going back to 1931. That is more than 80 years
and
ago.
then trying to project from that onwards,
Yes,
which obviously creates a lot of problems.
Absolutely wrong and undependable.
Absolutely. Dr. Mr. Habibullah, how do you respond to this?
Well, the point is that as Dr. Unni says, probably I am incompetent and wouldn't have risen to a position in government had I not been a Muslim. But I might...
he didn't say that. He said that you wouldn't have become the chairman of National Commission of Minorities if there was no minorities.
The point is that this really, what Dr. Jodhka has been saying, the point is that, as was also said, that you see the classification of a person by religion, then you go ahead and classify that religion as being socially backward. Am I socially backward?
But there are a lot of Muslims who are socially backward.
Yes, they are. But they therefore need to be classified according to their social backwardness, not according to their religion. Because if you do that according to religion, then you categorize people. And you lead to the remarks, like Dr. Unni's remarks, that people who have risen to high positions who happen to be Muslims are obviously incompetent.
No, he didn't say that. I don't think he said that. I don't think he said that. In all fairness, he didn't say that. He said that there would not have been a chat.
I think...
One second, Rakesh.
I have no difficulty with that. I probably am an
incompetent person. And I think you should be the Human Rights Commission and the Minority Commission. I think this tradition is wrong, that Minority Commission will be held by someone from minority. I think this is a communal tradition. That I would agree. And I also believe that this minority majority classification was done by the British rulers. And Tajamul Hussain, you remember Tajamul Hussain was a member of the Constituent Assembly. During the Constituent Assembly debate, he said that this majority and minority is a British creation. They have gone throughout this term from your dictionary.
That is exactly my point.
And I want
both of you agree on this, that there should not be any categorization on the basis of minorities.
I would go further. There is this huge argument going on that, well, the Ghar Wapsi and we are all Hindus. I would say that yes, the word Hindu is classified. There's an Arabic word, as you know.
Yeah.
It was a word coined to describe the citizens of India. Therefore, what Dr. Jodhka is saying, the diversities in Hinduism are such that they are much greater than diversities of different faiths, particularly the Judeo-Christian faiths. The differences in Judaism, Christianity and Islam are much smaller than the differences in the whole diversity of Hinduism. So therefore, it is a very rich, wide scope. And these classifications were done, bringing back to the earlier argument, these classifications were done in order to categorize people in different categories.
Okay. Professor Jodhka?
See, there are two discourses. I think we need to make a distinction between the two. One is this discourse of cultural diversity, which is a very cultural kind of, discourse, like you talk about varieties of colors and paintings and stuff like that. So that is all right at its own level. But the problem comes as a state system, as government, as a kind of society. When we are talking about it, we are talking about development. And I think what we need to worry about is whether development corresponds with certain kind of group identities. The answer so far, whatever material we have, the answer is clearly yes. It doesn't correspond aggregately. Urban Muslim, educated Muslim is exactly same as an educated Sikh or as an educated middle class urban Hindu in terms of the orientation, in terms of their competence, etc., etc. But there are diversities of communities. The moment you talk about Muslims, there are caste groups among Muslims.
Right.
And these are not corresponding to Hindu caste groups. Islam has its own hierarchy. And those hierarchies are critical for developmental state because certain kind of communities are left behind.
Right.
They have never owned land. They have been landless historically. They have been tied to certain kind of occupations. Even today, if you go to rural Bihar, there are certain kind of occupation tied to certain communities and vice versa. And therefore, those communities have not been able to move.
No, 1 second, Professor Jodhka, I'm trying to understand. Both Rakesh, Sinha and Habibullah are saying that, there needs to be no classification.
No, there have to be classification because developmental experience varies significantly across groups and communities. And religion, Hinduism today is also religion. There are people who actively identify themselves as Hindus, and that also means not being Sikhs, not being Christians, not being Muslims. I think that needs to be accepted and recognized and respected. There is no problem with that. I think there are religious identities which are significant.
And do you think that as far as the caste is concerned, Dr. Vijayanunni was talking about, you think that we have to revive that whole, the pre-independence
the colonial category of caste, but we need to have a new understanding of caste based on the present day developmental process.
Correct.
Right? There are Muslim castes who would not correspond with any Hindu caste because the way constitution defines caste and the way mainstream discourse, colonial discourse and also sociological discourse defines about caste, they talk about caste simply in Varna hierarchy as a Hindu system. That is empirically not true. My own research and many other people have shown that this is not how caste works on ground. Caste is a regional formation. Every region has its own kind of hierarchical structure. Communities, Christians also, for example, most Christians.
So, caste should become part of the census data process.
Precisely, but it should also be reinvented, reclassified, not in the manner in which we understand caste.
Would you accept that?
No, one major thing is emerging that Muslims have caste hierarchy.
Yes,
it's not emerging, it's been known for a long time.
On the religious ground, they don't accept it. Because if the government will introduce the caste, it cannot be one-way traffic. It should come from the society itself because there will be a lot of resistance. It's not merely academicians and the data collectors can do that and policymakers can do that. It must come from the society, it is legitimacy from the society that we have caste. Number two, second thing I want to know that if there is a social significance of the data, it is not merely the economic significance, social significance, social conservativeness of a particular community is a reason for the backwardness. Suppose a particular community and religion saying that no, don't use contraceptive. The population policy says that two children norms. Now there is
no such policy anymore.
It is verbally, it is practically we are the
because there are people now asking for people to produce 10 kids and 6 kids and all that.
The Structure Committee has come up with a report that there are many Muslim families, they have done a study. They say that this is the children are the gift of the God.
That's exactly what some other people are also saying.
Then there is a reaction. That's why I want to just put the point that if the social significance of data is not there, then there is no need of collecting the religion-based data. But there is a social significance and sociological.
No doubt about it. Social significance for data, everybody accepts that it has huge significance. Professor Mr. Habibullah, very quickly because we're running out of time. So you think that caste-based data also needs to be in the manner in which Professor Jodhka is saying that we reinvent the whole thing.
I would qualify. I do agree with what Professor Jodhka says, but I would not agree that you try to resurrect the caste system. Now, gradually the caste system has been withering away as a result of our efforts over the last 66 years, and we don't want to now resurrect it and reaffirm it. As I said, and I would disagree with Professor Jodhka with you, in certain areas, it is like in Lakshadweep which I mentioned, it is identical to the Hindu caste system, untouchable.
It's not a question of resurrecting caste system, it's a question of empirically understanding how hierarchy exists.
Okay.
If I may just finish, backwardness and economic and social backwardness on the basis of caste or class is something that needs to be taken note of, because that is where the policy of government should be
Precisely,
directed.
Okay, I think you have any point very quickly.
Well, lesser identity should be through the census data collection. We should not reinforce the
Not reinforce identities. Anyway, this has been a completely very interesting debate. You know, we are looking at the whole thing again. We hope that this kind of debate will continue, because by the time the next census is undertaken, these points of view which have emerged hopefully will come into play. But it has been a very interesting debate. Thanks to all my guests, Dr. Vijayanunni from Trivandrum, who joined us from Trivandrum, SS Jodhka, Habibullah and Rakesh Sinha. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.